Did you ever stop and wonder if you could be related to everyone with your last name?
Just think if you're a Lincoln, how you'd be congratulated if Honest Abe were someone you could claim.
To clear up any mystery, just check your family history.
Genealogy's the name of the game. Now some ancestors you'll find you want to hide,
but most of them will fill your heart with pride.
Oh, your family tree, your family tree. Check your genealogy, find who was who and how who came to be. On your family tree.
Welcome to the Genealogy radio show, the radio show that's keeping you in the loop. And this week's show is all about Ireland in the 17th century and some of the sources that we have to help us family history detectives determine on what we can find out about our Irish ancestry. I'm delighted to tell you that looking at the Irish Manuscripts Commission, that Pender's census of 1659 is fully available as a PDF. And we shall put that up on a link on our migration to from our Mixcloud onto our YouTube channel and so on, because it'll help people when they're listening to understand the sources. Now, 17th century Ireland is a very different place to 18th century Ireland or 16th century Ireland, because it was very much in a time of warfare and flux, and it was very undecided at how Ireland's history was going to turn out in a religious sense. And we can see that by basically how the sources, what the sources tell us at this time. So according to J.G. Sims in 1967 article in Irish Historical Studies in 17th century Ireland, the 17th century was a period of great change in Ireland. There were successive transfers of land from Catholic to Protestant ownership. Political and administrative power passed into the hands of a new English minority, and two major attempts to reverse these trends, the Confederate and Jacobite wars, proved disastrous for those who supported the legitimate monarchy. The Catholic Church was on the defensive, and at the end of the century was subject to the penal laws and a lot of legal restraint. The Irish economy was badly affected by these wars in the 17th century, and this was the century where Cromwell's forces came to Ireland as well, and the resilience that it showed in the intervals and so on. Now remember, England is going through its own troubles with Oliver Cromwell and so on, and the fact that the whole monarchy was overthrown in the 17th century in England. With the restoration of Charles II, we see some different things happening in Ireland, and the 1659 census, or Pender census, named after Seamus Pender, who was a lecturer in UCC and who would have wrote the introduction to this one, the Irish Manuscripts Commission in 1936. There's quite a lot would say it was a poll tax in some ways, because they were measuring people or determining who was who over the age of 15 in every locality. Now, it's an excellent source for those who want to look statistically at who's living in Ireland, what the population is, and so on. There's a guesstimate of 1,300,000 people given as the population number. And as Sims says, the progress of the materials and the detail of the 17th century, you know, there has been very few books in such, and no such study as so on. But the development, according to Sims, in 1603 to 1640, is that you could look at the Londonderry plantation. You could very much see how Stafford Inquisitions and all these things happened, these inquisitions that happened, what was happening during the various different reigns. The administrative in the Stuart reign is very significant because it comes after the Tudor conquest of Ireland, and we get to see what's happening on the ground with the population. And they start dividing up the population in Pender census into English, Irish, and Scots. And there is some places where there's New English and so on. And you can see that the baronies and the towns are named. And remember, these baronies were relatively new. They weren't even 100 years old in some of the cases. So it's really giving you a snapshot of how things are being collected and the administrative, what's going on with the administrative machine. William Petty writes an excellent essay in 1687, and these are all really important sources for you when you're going through this type of work, when you're looking at an excellent 17th century source and so on. So I really think that it is very much overlooked in some cases as to what's happening here. And we're very fortunate in Ireland to be able to say that they're available online. With these wars that happened in 1641 to 1659, we have the depositions in TCD, we have the Down survey maps. All of these are really, really important. And they give you a clue as to what's happening with the Confederation of Kilkenny, all these kind of sources. And the Irish Manuscripts Commission is very much overlooked in our source work and what we've done in doing the genealogy radio show. So we intend to make up for that by showing exactly what sources are available in it online. They had a flip book thing to be able to look through the sources, but now you can just download the PDF of Pender's census, which I prefer because a PDF, a portable document format, is far more robust as such. So I suppose what we're looking at is the restoration of a monarchy in 1660 with Charles II being restored to the throne. And we have some references by J.G. Sims in Irish Historical Studies article of Edward MacLysaght, Irish Life in the 17th Century, which takes 1660 as its starting point. And he draws on the documents of Dunton's letters, the lively picture of the countryside, and how, you know, what's going on in Ireland at that time. And especially for our ancestors, when you're not looking at 8 million people in the 19th century happening there. So some of the things you need to remember are the Jacobite angles, the Jacobite wars, how they're impacting on Ireland, Ireland being a battleground, and we've also got the Battle of the Boyne happening. We've got a lot happening in the cities and Limerick and so on. And, you know, these are all very significant events. And also what happens to the Catholic Church in the post-war period of William's reign, you know, where, you know, you have the ascendancy and you have very much a state church and the Church of Ireland under William and Anne, and what's happening there administratively after the Jacobite War. Many have to go, they're forced into exile, and it's insistent that they do. Now back to Pender's census again, just having a look at some of the things that we would have researched for the show today. The significance of it, the availability of the source online, what it can reveal to the family history detectives and researchers. And basically it gives you a picture in each place of what the population looks like and who they are by name in each location in some places. So it has the supplementary information. It's known as Pender census. And just to give you some of the provenance, W.H. Harding announced its discovery of what has been known as the census of Ireland in 1659. He had been searching among the papers of the Marquis of Lansdowne for the Down survey baronial maps and came across the census during the course of his research. The manuscripts were at that time in the muniment room in Lansdowne House in London. Harding obtained permission to have them transferred to Dublin and deposited in the Landed Estates Records Office. They comprise of returns for Antrim, Armagh, Derry, Donegal, Down, Fermanagh, Monaghan, that's in Ulster. Clare, Cork City, Cork County is incomplete. Kerry, Limerick City, Limerick County, Tipperary, Waterford City and County in Munster. Carlow, Dublin City, Dublin County, Kildare, Kilkenny, Kings County, Longford, Louth Meath is incomplete. Queen's County, Westmeath, Wexford in Leinster, and Leitrim, Roscommon and Sligo in Connacht. So it's really important because you get to see the surnames that are prevalent in those places. Now there were the terminology, the titulados, the who are considered the heads of the areas. A lot of research needs to be done into that yet. And the evidence in antiquarian sources, sourced by Frost, for example, in the history of County Clare, is really important. So you have it following an English poll tax which had happened in England 4 or 5 months prior to that. And it's directed that all persons of the rank and degrees therein mentioned should pay the respective sums of money appointed, and that every person above the age of 15 of either sex, under the degree of quality of a yeoman or farmer yeoman or farmer's wife or widow, shall pay 12 pence. So it's important not to take it out of context, that it's not just an Irish thing, because it's following upon legislation that's fitting into England, and where we are with that, could certainly do with some more work there. Who made the selections? I've got this from Pender's work in the beginning of the census. And it's able and discreet Protestants appointed by county commissioners named in the ordinances were to inquire of all and every person within the respective places limited to their care of each sex and above age of 15, of their ranks, qualities and degrees of the dwelling and abiding places of such persons. These particulars, when obtained, were to be furnished to the county commissioners, who in turn were to deliver to the high collector in each county. So as a source, it's absolutely great. And some of the other sources that were named in this were The Elements of Ireland and Its Religion and Policy by Sir William Petty, the Fellow of the Royal Society in 1687. And there's actually Petty's poetry, where it's translated from French. I teach the husbandmen to tend flocks, herds and fields, which sure increase, and how when differing races blend, in faithful league, war's woes will cease. Grant ye high gods, who laid aside in distant times contentious arms, my mighty plan be not denied propitious rest from like alarms. Cast centuries of direful hate into oblivion's mystic flames, and from the ashes raise one state, blessed neath thy fostering sway, O James. So that's obviously O James, meaning James Stewart. So it's playing to that, where he would have been very much belonging in the 1650s and 60s to other aspects. So he's kind of going, let's all go as one state now, and so on. So there's a lot in that, and it was written in French. So some have imagined there being 1,300,000 people in Ireland, and they had a plan actually to bring 1 million of them into England and to leave the other 300,000 for herdsmen and dairymen behind. Now that comes from an older statute again, where there was a plan to do that. So all these things are you can see what they're reading and what they're influenced by when they're looking at the manuscripts. And to quit all other trades in Ireland, but that of cattle only, would affect the settlement, improvement and union above propounded. But against this method there lies this gross and obvious objection that transporting of 1 million people will cost £1 million, and that the housing and other goods in Ireland which will be lost thereby are worth 2 million more, nor is it safe to estimate other damages and expenses consequence of this undertaking at less than 1 million more, at 4 million of expense and damage. So they're actually kind of even thinking statistically, well, what's it going to cost to get all the Irish people out of Ireland and leave the others in control as such? it's a kind of always interesting to look at an actual source where you're seeing what the mindset of the people are. And I'm going to be doing some statistical analysis on the province's work. So I'll do another radio show on that. And it's just an interesting, really, really interesting source. And we're delighted to be able to share that with you today and to be able to go through what's going on there in Ireland. And for example, you get the place names as well. So you have the place names, you have the number of people, you have the titulado names, you have English, Irish, and it's really valuable for place names because it can give you places that may not exist anymore, but where your ancestors actually did come from in the 17th century and so on. So it's especially useful for places like Waterford, where people were going and they were going knowing that they were coming from one place, but maybe that place doesn't exist 100 years later, but it does in your ancestry, and it can give you a clue as to all that. So basically what we're doing with this show today is looking at 17th century Ireland, and we have, you know, a number of sources with J.G. Sims and work, which is very, very good on what happens with the territorial changes and the high activity due to the economic history of Ireland in the 17th century as well. So a very interesting approach to be able to look at the two parts of the 17th century, what's happening prior to restoration, what happened within the monastery and the Stuart lineages in Ireland, and the land, you know, the new estate system coming into real force, and then with plantation and so on, and what's happening when that finishes. So really, we're blessed with these wonderful sources by the Irish Manuscript Commission. So all you have to do is Google Pender Census Irish Manuscripts Commission, and that'll come up for you. And we think you should have a good look at some of the other sources that are available there and enjoy them for your family history work. This is the show that's keeping you in the loop, and we're delighted to be able to tell you it airs at 4 o'clock on a Thursday, and it's podcast out on and repeated on a Sunday. My name's Lorna Maloney, and this is the Genealogy radio show, the radio show that's keeping you in the loop.
Did you ever stop and wonder if you could be related to everyone with your last name?
Just think, if you're a Lincoln, how you'd be congratulated if Honest Abe were someone you could claim.
To clear up any mystery, just check your family history.
Genealogy's the name of the game. Now some ancestors you'll find you want to hide,
but most of them will fill your heart with pride.
Oh, your family tree, your family tree. Check your genealogy, find who was who and how who came to be. On your family, 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 family tree.